Thank you for coming to watch Part 2. If you have not yet seen Part 1, kindly be advised to see it first before you continue with this. I hope you have subscribed. If no, please click the subscribe button so that you can be the first person to get our fresh releases. When the door swung open, she saw him properly for the first time. He was taller than she imagined, with a presence that filled the hallway yet didn't feel imposing. His dark hair was neatly brushed back, his suit simple but refined. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, steady, warm, searching without prying. In one hand, he held a bouquet of fresh lilies. In the other, a paper bag that smelled faintly of baked goods. "For you," he said, offering the flowers with a small smile. Then he glanced down as Isabella peeked from behind her mother's leg, clutching her bear. "And for her, some pastries I thought she might like. Nothing too sweet." Maria's throat tightened. No man had ever arrived at her door with such thoughtfulness. She accepted the lilies slowly, her fingers brushing his for the briefest second. "Thank you. That's very kind of you. May I come in?" The question was simple, but it wasn't lost on her that he asked. He waited, respecting the boundary. Maria hesitated for a heartbeat longer, then stepped aside. "Yes, please." The afternoon unfolded with a surprising ease. Alexander sat cross-legged on the floor, allowing Isabella to bring him crayons and paper. Instead of brushing her off, he joined her play, sketching clumsy animals that made the little girl giggle uncontrollably. Maria watched from the couch, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and wonder. She had imagined awkward silences, forced conversations. Instead, laughter filled the small apartment. When Isabella finally grew tired and wandered to her crib for a nap, Maria brought Alexander a cup of coffee. They sat across from each other, the quiet hum of the city outside cocooning them in a fragile intimacy. "You're not what I expected," Maria admitted softly, breaking the silence. Alexander raised an eyebrow, his lips curving slightly. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Maybe someone who'd use this situation to take advantage, or someone who'd act like a savior, reminding me at every turn of what I owe them." She looked down at her hands. "But you're just you. Patient, kind, real." Alexander studied her carefully. He wanted to tell her everything, the wealth, the power, the scars he carried, but he held back. Not yet. She deserved honesty, but she also deserved time. "I know what it's like to lose trust in people," he said instead, his voice quiet, almost reflective. "I've had things taken from me that can never be replaced, and I swore I'd never let anyone close again. But when your message came that night, something in me shifted. Maybe it was the rawness of it. Maybe it was fate, but I knew I couldn't ignore it." Maria's eyes met his, searching. "You really don't see this as a mistake, do you?" He shook his head. "No, sometimes the wrong number is the right connection." Her breath caught at the sincerity in his tone. Against her will, she felt her defenses slipping, piece by fragile piece. The afternoon passed quickly. They spoke of simple things, books, childhood memories, even dreams for the future. Maria found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. She had forgotten how good it felt. But she also noticed something in Alexander, a shadow in his gaze when the conversation brushed too close to his past. Pain he didn't voice, secrets he held close. It made her curious, but also cautious. Was she ready to know everything? As the evening drew near, Alexander stood reluctantly. "I should go. I don't want to overstay my welcome." Maria walked him to the door, Isabella now awake and perched on her hip, yawning. Alexander reached out gently, brushing a strand of hair from the child's face. "Goodbye, Isabella. Be good to your mother." The tenderness of the gesture left Maria momentarily breathless. She managed to quiet, "Thank you for coming. Thank you for letting me in." And with that, he stepped out into the hallway, the door closing softly behind him. That night, after putting Isabella to bed, Maria sat on the couch, staring at the lilies in a vase. Her heart was conflicted. Part of her wanted to believe this was the beginning of something new, something safe. Another part whispered warnings of disappointment, danger, betrayal. Her phone rang, jolting her from her thoughts. An unfamiliar number flashed across the screen. Hesitant, she answered, "Hello?" A voice crackled on the line, low, rough, ominous. "Be careful who you let into your home, Maria. Not everyone is who they seem." The line went dead. Maria's blood ran cold. She stared at the phone in her trembling hand, her chest tightening. Was it a prank? A threat? A warning? Her mind spiraled, fear clawing at her ribs. She turned her head toward Isabella's crib, where the little girl slept peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing outside their fragile cocoon. Maria whispered to herself, voice breaking, "God, what have I done?" Maria hadn't slept properly since that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the memory replayed. The knock on her door, the weight of fear pressing down on her chest, and then the sight of him, tall, composed, with eyes that carried both sorrow and something unspoken. She had let him in. For reasons she still didn't fully understand, she had allowed a stranger, a man whose name she had only just learned, to step into the fragile world she had built around Isabella. And then, just as suddenly, he had left. Maria sat at the small wooden table in her apartment, a chipped mug of coffee cooling between her hands. Isabella was napping in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. The silence should have been comforting, but instead it gnawed at her. She told herself she should be relieved. He was gone. The danger, if it had ever been real, was behind her. But the truth was more complicated. Alexander had unsettled her. He hadn't behaved like the men she had learned to avoid, the ones who looked at her with pity or hunger, who saw her circumstances as weakness to exploit. No, Alexander had looked at her with something else, something she couldn't name without feeling exposed. She pressed the mug to her lips, trying to wash away the thoughts with bitter coffee, but the questions lingered. Who was he really? Why couldn't she stop thinking about him? Alexander. Across the city, Alexander leaned against the glass wall of his office, staring at the skyline. From this height, everything looked small. Streets like lines on a map, cars no bigger than ants. He had built this empire, brick by brick, deal by deal. He should have felt triumphant. But for the first time in years, the glass tower felt like a cage. He rubbed his temple. He hadn't meant to go to her door that night. It had been reckless, crossing a line without permission. But something inside him had demanded proof that Maria was more than words on a screen, that Isabella was not a figment of desperation conjured to tug at his conscience. And now, he remembered the way Isabella had gripped his finger, her tiny fist impossibly strong. He remembered Maria's defiant eyes, guarded yet shimmering with resilience. He remembered the peeling paint of her apartment walls, the fragile pride in her voice as she insisted she didn't want charity. Alexander exhaled sharply, pushing away from the glass. His assistant's voice buzzed faintly from outside the office, reminding him of meetings, contracts, signatures waiting for his approval, but none of it held weight. For the first time in years, the numbers on his desk didn't matter. All that mattered was the woman and child he had walked away from. Maria at the diner. The following evening, Maria worked the dinner rush at the diner. Plates clattered, voices rose and fell, and the smell of grease clung to her uniform. She moved mechanically between tables, refilling coffee, delivering orders, collecting tips that barely covered the week's groceries. But her mind wasn't there. It was back in her apartment, back at the door where she had stood frozen. "You're distracted,"
Carla, the cook, muttered as she slid a plate of fries onto the counter. "Your head somewhere else tonight?" Maria forced a smile. "Just tired." Carla gave her a skeptical look, but didn't press. Maria was grateful for that. She wasn't ready to explain, wasn't ready to say out loud that a stranger, a wealthy man with eyes too sharp and too kind at once, had stepped into her life like a storm she hadn't seen coming. The message. It was nearly midnight when Maria got home, exhaustion pulling at her bones. She laid Isabella in her crib, changed out of her uniform, and collapsed onto the couch. Her phone buzzed on the table. For a moment, she ignored it, then curiosity won. One new message. "How's Isabella today?" Her heart stumbled. It was him. She stared at the words, fingers hovering over the keyboard. He wasn't asking for anything, he wasn't offering anything, just asking. Minutes stretched into hours, or maybe it only felt that way before she finally typed back. "She's fine. Teething. Won't sleep through the night." She hesitated, then hit send. His reply came quickly. "I remember those days. My niece kept my sister awake for months. Try frozen fruit in a mesh feeder. It helps with the gums." Maria blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected practical advice. She almost smiled. Almost. "Thanks," she typed back. And that was it. A simple exchange. But it left her lying awake long after, staring at the ceiling, wondering why the silence in her apartment suddenly felt less heavy. Slow exchanges. Over the next week, their messages trickled back and forth. They weren't constant, not overwhelming, just steady. "How was your shift?" he'd ask. "Long. Customers were impossible today. I know the feeling. My boardroom isn't much different." Sometimes he shared fragments of his own life, a memory of his late wife, the ache of silence in a too large house, the loneliness of eating dinners cooked by someone else's hands. Other times, he asked about Isabella, about the small milestones Maria celebrated quietly, her first attempt at crawling, her laugh that lit up the room. Maria guarded herself carefully, but bit by bit, she found herself looking forward to his messages, not because he offered help, he didn't push that anymore, but because he listened. Really listened. And listening was something she hadn't had in a long time.
One afternoon, Maria met her friend, Elena, the one the message had originally been meant for. They sat on a park bench, Isabella gurgling happily in her stroller. "So, let me get this straight," Elena said, brows arched. "You sent me a desperate text, and it went to some stranger instead. And now, you're talking to him?" Maria shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't supposed to happen, but he's different." "Different how?" Elena pressed. Maria hesitated, searching for words. "He doesn't treat me like I'm weak. He doesn't look at me like I'm a problem to solve. He just listens." Elena shook her head. "Maria, you don't know this man. Rich men don't give without expecting something back. Be careful." The words stung because they echoed Maria's own fears. She had asked herself the same questions in the dark. Why was he still around? What did he really want? But Isabella laughed them, reaching for a falling leaf, and Maria's heart tightened. Whatever the risk, something in her couldn't dismiss the man who had shown up when no one else had. That night, as Maria rocked Isabella to sleep, her phone buzzed again. Maria. Her breath caught. He rarely used her name. "I'd like to see Isabella again, if you'll let me." Her fingers tightened on the phone. This was different. This was more. She looked at her daughter's sleeping face, at the peace that came only after hours of tears and teething pain. Then she looked at the message again. Every instinct told her to be careful, to keep her walls high. But another voice, quieter, yet stronger, whispered of possibility. She didn't reply right away. She couldn't. But the words on the screen pulsed like a heartbeat, echoing in her chest. Morning came like a held breath. Thin light pressed against the curtains, the hush of the street below drifting into the apartment, and somewhere between them, Maria's decision waited. She lay on her side, watching Isabella dream, her daughter's mouth opening and closing softly, as if it still remembered last night's bottle. In the quiet, the words from her phone glowed in her mind. "I'd like to see Isabella again, if you let me." She hadn't replied. She'd folded the message into the shadows of the room and told herself that time would answer for her. But time hadn't answered. It had only sat down beside her and let the question grow heavier. She slipped from the bed and padded into the small kitchenette, setting water to boil. The lilies he'd brought were still bright, bending toward the window like they trusted the sun. She touched a petal with her thumb, and the memory of the anonymous call from weeks ago swept through her. Be careful who you let into your home, Maria. Not everyone is who they seem. If fear had a sound, it would be that voice. She poured the hot water over instant coffee and stood very still. The apartment was so quiet she could hear the tiny tick of the wall clock. She didn't want to open her door to trouble, but she also couldn't shake the image of Isabella, chubby fist closing around Alexander's finger as if a thread had existed between them long before they met. Some connections didn't ask permission. They arrived and made their case in silence. Her phone vibrated. She didn't have to check to know who it might be. She checked anyway. "No pressure. Only if you're comfortable," the message read. "We can meet in a park. Public, daytime. Your call. Your rules." Your call, your rules. She breathed out. The kettle hissed on, forgotten. It took her a minute to gather the words that felt more like a stitch than a sentence. "Riverfront Park, near the old fountain. Tomorrow at 3. I'll bring Isabella. No surprises." The reply came after a pause that felt both merciful and endless. "I'll be there. No surprises. Thank you, Maria." She set the phone down and pressed a hand to her chest, as if to quiet the startled, galloping thing inside it. She wasn't saying yes to a future. She was saying yes to an afternoon. That felt manageable. That felt like something she could carry without dropping everything else she held. She turned off the kettle and forgot about the coffee. Alexander read her message twice and then leaned back against his chair, eyes on the high windows of his office. The city looked like a clever lie from up here, tidy, organized, obedient. Down in the streets, everyone knew it was a different story. He preferred the streets lately. They told the truth, even when it hurt. His assistant knocked and slipped in a folder of contracts with colored tabs along the edges. 2 signatures needed before noon, board call at 1, and move the call to tomorrow, or to later today, after 4. She blinked once, then nodded. He'd been rearranging and excusing too much since the wrong number message crashed into his days. Before, he could work until midnight and call it a life. Now his calendar looked like a landscape he was learning to walk differently. When she left, he opened a desk drawer and stared at the things he kept there when he didn't know what to do with his hands: fountain pen, pocket knife, and a cheap plastic bubble wand he'd picked up last week and then felt foolish about. He wasn't sure what a man like him was supposed to carry when visiting a park to meet a woman and her child. Nothing that could be misunderstood. Nothing that felt like a promise he wasn't ready to make. He pocketed the bubble wand anyway. He imagined Isabella's small hand reaching again, holding on like she had the right to. The image steadied him. "No surprises," she'd written. He looked at his phone. He should say more. He should say less. He chose honesty and let it be brief. "Thank you for trusting me with an afternoon." He set the phone down and stood, the decision landing in his bones with a soft, unfamiliar relief. Tomorrow, he would show up, and he would bring only himself. Riverfront Park wore its Sunday face. Strollers, dogs chasing nothing in particular, teenagers in clusters, a saxophone trying to hold on to the memory of a church hymn.
The old fountain rattled and sang water into air, as if trying to be both monument and child at once. Maria arrived early and sat on the low stone wall, Isabella tucked under the shade of the stroller canopy, kicking her feet against the tray. She told Elena she wasn't sure why, except that some choices are less heavy when held by more than one person. El Parque, really? Elena said, eyebrows climbing. All right, I'll be nearby, just nearby, not breathing down your neck. She squeezed Maria's hand then, her face softening. You don't owe him a yes or a no. You owe yourself peace. If this brings peace, good. If it brings noise, I'll be the one to say enough. Maria scanned the paths, the benches, the path that curved under the willow trees and back around the fountain. She had chosen this spot because sightlines were clean. She had chosen it because there was nowhere to hide. Bella, she murmured, nudging the stroller so it rocked gently. We're going to meet the nice man, the one who brought you books, the one who made you laugh. Isabella cooed as if this was all much simpler than her mother made it. When he appeared, she knew him even from a distance. Not by the suit, he wasn't wearing one now, but by the way space relaxed around him. He walked without hurry, hands empty, eyes searching for her and finding her with the kind of attention that felt like a gift. He lifted one hand and didn't wave exactly, more a greeting that stopped before it asked for anything. Hi. Hi, she echoed, and stood. Up close, the city wore him more lightly. Dark jeans, a plain sweater, a relief of a smile that didn't reach for charm. He stopped at what felt like the right distance, close enough for conversation, far enough for safety. No surprises, he said softly, almost apologetic. Just me. She nodded toward the stroller, and us. They both looked at Isabella, who kicked her foot again as if performing hello in a language older than words. Alexander glanced at the stroller's tray, at the crumbs from a cracker and the smear of banana, and his mouth tilted, a smile that was true. I brought something, but now it feels ridiculous. Ridiculous sometimes is useful, Maria said, surprising herself. He pulled out the bubble wand. Cheap, plastic, neon, the kind you buy near the checkout and forget about until a child comes along to remind you. He held it up sheepishly. May I? Maria looked at Isabella, then at him. She nodded.
He dipped the wand, lifted it, and blew. A small galaxy rose and drifted, clear spheres wobbling through sunlight, catching colors that weren't there until the water decided to hold them. One bubble landed on the stroller tray and didn't pop right away. Isabella squealed, slapped it, and it burst into a wet star across her palm. She laughed as if she'd invented joy. It was a silly thing, a small thing. It moved something large in Maria anyway. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding and looked at him without the armor for a single beat. Thank you, she said. He looked like he could say, for what? And instead said nothing, because sometimes silence honors the thing that words would bruise. They walked. The fountain murmured behind them. He matched her pace without apparent effort, never stepping too near, never falling back so far she had to reach for him with her attention. He didn't try to steer the stroller. He didn't try to explain himself first. He let the day do the talking until it ran out of easy sentences. Near the willow, she stopped and faced him. Before we go any further, I need to say something you won't like. He folded his hands as if to promise they would stay out of the way. Say it. I got a call, she said. The words felt like stones she'd been carrying in her pockets. Weeks ago, after you came to the apartment, a voice, low, rough. They said I should be careful who I let into my home, that not everyone is who they seem. He didn't reach for outrage. He didn't reach for defense. He let the sentence settle between them, and only then did he answer. I hate that you had to hear that. I can't tell you who called. I don't know. But I can tell you what I am and what I am not. She waited. I'm not a good man because I sent money. I'm not a bad man because I have it. I'm a man who made a choice to answer a message and keep answering because the person on the other end felt real in a world that keeps getting noisier. I should have asked before I found your address, and I'm sorry I didn't. I used the delivery information because I wanted to be sure I wasn't being played. It was intrusive. It won't happen again. He hadn't rehearsed none of it. She could tell. People who practiced speeches didn't let their voices do that small, unguarded thing his had just done on the word sorry. And who are you when you're not at parks and doorways? He hesitated, the way people do when they understand that truth has weight. He said, I run a company, a larger one than I make it sound. People tend to put that first when they talk to me. I'd rather they didn't. Do people follow you? Take pictures? Turn your life into something for others to chew? Sometimes, he admitted. Less now. I built my walls high after my wife died. I kept the cameras bored. If I did this right today, no one knows I'm here but you. Walls, she repeated, tasting the word. That's one thing we share. He breathed out, a smile without brightness. It is. They walked again. He blew more bubbles, and Isabella tried to grasp rainbows with her bare hands. On a bench, an old couple watched, leaning into each other because some things never stop being necessary. A dog passed and looked dignified about it. The city pretended it had all the time in the world. Tell me about her, Maria said after a while, her voice barely above the sound of leaves gossiping overhead. Your wife. He could have refused. He could have told a shorter truth, but he turned to face the space where the past lived and opened the door a crack. Her name was Lena. He spoke the name as if it had sharp edges and soft ones both. She loved terrible coffee and beautiful shoes. She laughed loud. People were always giving her their secrets because she kept them like a vault. We were friends before we were anything else. I liked that she didn't care who I would become. She wanted to know who I was when no one was looking. He paused. An accident took her. I don't tell that part as if the telling changes it. I'm sorry, she said. Thank you, he answered. And they both knew it was the kind of thank you that is old as grief. She bent to reposition Isabella's blanket and felt the familiar tug of a different ache. She straightened and let a quieter truth arrive. Isabella's father chose not to be in the picture. No elaboration, no apology for the shape of it. Sometimes I think I was one decision away from being erased. Then she cries at 3 a.m., and I remember I'm still here. He didn't ask for details. She didn't offer them. They let this, too, be enough. Near the river path, a vendor sold paper cones of seed for the pigeons that pretended to be swans when anyone watched. Alexander bought one and held it out to Maria. Your call. And something about the smallness of the phrase after big admissions made her smile where he could see it. She took the cone and gave Isabella a single seed. The baby pinched it and held it up like a prize. When the pigeons advanced, bold as unpaid rent, Maria held one palm out and they actually obeyed, shuffling back with offended dignity. Look at you, queen of the ridiculous. I've ruled worse, she said dryly. And together they laughed, the kind of laugh that shakes something loose without breaking it. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down with half attention as a mother who wants to be present and safe in equal measure. The number had no name. For a second, her stomach fell as if the path had given way beneath her feet. She opened the message. A public place is wiser, yes, but not safer, really. Her skin went cold. She stopped walking. He noticed at once. What is it? Wordless, she turned the screen toward him. The text sat there, simple, cruel. No signature, no threat that a police officer could write down, just the knowledge that somewhere, out of sight and too near, Someone had decided to belong to this day without being invited. He did not reach for the phone. He did not look around like a man in a movie. His shoulders tightened, and his eyes didn't leave hers. "Do you want to leave?" he asked. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with how quickly the answer arrived. "Do you want me with you or not?" She looked at Isabella, then at the path, then at him. Decisions with witnesses hurt less sometimes. She nodded. "Once. With me, but at a distance for now." Done. They cut the loop short and took the direct sidewalk back toward the street. He fell a step behind, the bubble wand now absurd in his pocket, his hands empty and visible. Maria pushed the stroller with a steady panic she prayed didn't show. She scanned faces. She saw nothing except people being people. The worst thing about a threat delivered by text is that everyone could be the sender, and no one was. At the park's edge, Elena appeared where Maria had said she would not breathe down her neck. She breathed down her neck anyway, because love is inconvenient like that. "Hey," she said, sweeping one look over Maria's face, and then the stroller, and then the man a pace behind. "You're the stranger with good timing and better manners." "Trying to be," he said. "Try harder," she replied, not unkindly. They walked the 2 blocks together, the women side by side, the stroller between them, Alexander a respectful shadow. At the corner, a bus shuddered to a halt and then thought better of it. Someone laughed across the street. Normal life went on like a dare. At the apartment building, Maria stopped. She turned to him there, on the steps she'd climbed 1,000 times, carrying groceries, exhaustion, hope. "Thank you for walking with us." "It was not nothing," he said, and somehow that was truer than your welcome would have been. Elena started up the stairs, giving them a moment that wasn't quite private. Maria gripped the stroller handle and chose another stitch of honesty. "I can't promise what this is. I can promise I won't let fear make the decisions for me." He nodded, relief flickering. "Then let me make you a promise back. No more surprises, no more showing up. If you want to meet, it's your ground, your time, your rules. If help is ever an insult, I won't offer it. If it's ever a kindness you choose, I'll do it quietly." "And the calls?" she asked, glancing down at the phone as if the screen could bite. "I'll ask my security team to look at what they can without crossing your lines. No digging into your life, only into the number that sent that message. If that itself is too much, tell me and I'll stand down." She waited. Fear pressed on one side of the scale. The thought of standing alone against a hidden face pressed on the other. "You can look," she said finally. "Only at the number." "Only at the number," he repeated, the way people repeat vows. "And I'll keep you updated. No guessing, no quiet." She nodded. The decision settled, not comfortable, not safe, but chosen. A window in the building above them rattled in its frame. A hand slammed it down. Life continued, messy and ordinary. Maria adjusted the stroller strap and met his eyes once more. "Thank you for the bubbles," she said, "because a small gratitude is sometimes the truest armor." He smiled, and this time it reached the place that had been careful all afternoon. "She caught a rainbow for a second," he said. "I don't know how many people can say that." "Maybe more than we think," she answered, and the moment softened like bread under steam. He stepped back. "Text me when you're upstairs." "I will." She and Elena carried the stroller up, bumping on each stair, pausing to rest halfway, because pretending not to be tired is a younger woman's game. At the landing, Elena whispered, "He's either trouble or tenderness." "Maybe both," Maria said. Then she added, because she'd earned the right to choose complexity, "I'll take tenderness with a plan." Inside the apartment, Isabella reached for the lilies as if she could pick light off the petals. Maria set her down on the blanket, checked the locks without making a ceremony of it, and looked at her phone. Another message waited, but not from the unknown number. "Home?" She typed back. "Home. Thank you for trusting me with a walk," he replied. She didn't answer right away. She sat on the floor and played a clapping game with Isabella, and when the baby crowed and slapped her palms with more enthusiasm than aim, Maria laughed with her whole mouth. Later, she sent one more message. "Next time, the library courtyard, Wednesday, if you're free." The reply was almost immediate, and this time she felt the yes like a light turned on. "Wednesday. I'll bring nothing but the afternoon." She set the phone aside. It buzzed again. Her breath caught. Unknown number. The message was a photo. The river path. The back of a woman with dark hair pushing a stroller beneath the willow's thin green curtain. A man a step behind, hands empty, head turned toward the child as if listening to a language he was trying to learn. No caption, no threat, just proof that the day hadn't belonged only to them. Maria swallowed. The photo wasn't a weapon by itself, but it leaned in that direction. She felt anger rise, quiet and hot. Not fear this time. Not entirely. She forwarded the image to Alexander with 2 words. "This again." His answer took longer than she liked, but shorter than she feared. "I see it. We'll handle it. Only the number. I'll keep you posted." She put the phone down and, without quite meaning to, pressed her palm flat on the floorboards as if to take the apartment's pulse. The room throbbed with their ordinary life. Milk warming, laundry waiting, lilies leaning toward the window, a bubble stick drying on the counter beside the coffee she'd never made. Isabella crawled toward her and bumped her head against Maria's knee like a small, affectionate animal. She lifted her onto her lap and pressed her lips to the soft hair that smelled of soap and sun. "We are not alone," she whispered into that hair. "Not this time." Outside, the afternoon slipped toward evening. Somewhere across the city, a man put his phone down and made a promise to an empty room. Somewhere nearer than that, someone closed a camera app and decided what to do with what they'd taken. The day went on, as if none of them were special and all of them were. Maria stood and drew the curtains halfway. Not open, not closed. A measured yes. Reflection. Trust does not arrive like thunder. It is a lamp we trim again and again while the wind keeps asking questions. Maria couldn't shake the image. The photo sat on her phone screen like a stain she couldn't scrub away. Isabella in her stroller outside the diner, her little hands clutching the edge, her smile caught in frozen innocence, taken from a distance, by someone she hadn't seen. She had deleted it, but the imprint remained in her mind. Every time she stepped outside, she found herself scanning corners, peering into shadows, searching faces. That morning, even the walk to the library felt heavier. The stroller wheels rattled across uneven pavement as she pushed Isabella forward, her heart thumping too loudly in her chest. Why had she agreed to meet Alexander again? Why hadn't she just stayed inside, locked the door, and cut all ties before it was too late? But then Isabella giggled, tugging at the toy clipped to her stroller, and Maria's resolve softened. Maybe she wanted this more than she admitted, to not feel alone anymore. Maybe she wanted to believe in the possibility of kindness, even if it terrified her. Alexander was already there. He had chosen a bench in the far corner of the library courtyard, beneath the shade of an oak tree. A rare softness crossed his features as he watched children chase each other near the fountain. He had always walked past scenes like this, too busy, too closed off to care. But now he found himself imagining Isabella among them, her laughter blending with theirs. When he saw Maria approaching, pushing the stroller with measured caution, he stood. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The memory of the last meeting, her laughter, her guarded smile, the ease he had felt, hung between them. "You came," he said, finally, his voice quieter than he intended. I almost didn't, she admitted. Her eyes flicked over her shoulder, scanning the courtyard. He caught the movement instantly. What happened? Maria hesitated, then pulled out her phone. She showed him the photo. Alexander's expression hardened as he took in the image. A muscle worked in his jaw. "Who sent this?" Maria whispered. "I don't know. It came last night. No words, just the picture." Alexander's mind raced. This wasn't random. Someone was watching her, watching Isabella, and somehow, by extension, watching him. He crouched slightly, lowering his voice. "Maria, listen to me. You are not alone in this. Whoever did this, whatever this is, I'll handle it." Her grip tightened on the stroller handle. "That's the problem. I don't want you handling my life. I've been handling it alone since the day Isabella was born. I don't want pity or protection I didn't ask for." He looked up at her then, meeting her eyes with unflinching steadiness. "This isn't pity. It's responsibility. Someone crossed the line, and I won't stand by." Stillness in the courtyard. For a moment, silence fell. The sounds of the courtyard drifted around them. Children's laughter, the splash of the fountain, the rustle of leaves. Maria exhaled slowly. Something about his certainty, his refusal to waver, chipped away at her resistance. She sat down on the bench, pulling the stroller closer. Alexander followed, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Isabella loves the fountain," she said softly, watching her daughter's wide eyes fix on the spray of water. "It's the only thing that keeps her quiet sometimes." Alexander smiled faintly. "She has good taste. It's peaceful." For the next few minutes, they spoke of small things: Maria's shifts at the diner, Isabella's stubborn refusal to nap, Alexander's inability to cook anything beyond scrambled eggs. The conversation was light, almost ordinary, and for a moment Maria let herself breathe. But the shadows remain.
Then Alexander's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowning. A message from his head of security. "Tracing number. Signal bounces. Whoever it is knows how to hide." Alexander slipped the phone back into his pocket, masking his expression before Maria noticed. But inside, a cold determination crystallized. Whoever was behind that photo wasn't some random stranger. This was deliberate, calculated. And he would find them. The moment between them. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the courtyard, Isabella stirred and began to fuss. Maria lifted her into her arms, rocking her gently. "She's getting heavier," Maria said with a soft laugh. "Soon I won't be able to carry her like this." Alexander watched them, something aching in his chest. The way Maria held her daughter, the fierce tenderness, the quiet strength, it stirred something he hadn't felt in years. "You're stronger than you think," he murmured. Maria's eyes met his, startled. The intensity there made her breath catch. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. No fountain, no children, no shadows. Just the weight of his gaze and the fragile possibility that something unspoken was beginning to bloom between them. She looked away first, pressing a kiss to Isabella's hair. "Strength isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's just survival." Alexander's throat tightened. He wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her she didn't have to survive alone anymore. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he said quietly, "Then let me walk beside you." As they stood to leave, a figure across the street lowered a camera, slipping into the crowd before Alexander could catch a full glimpse. Maria didn't see, but Alexander did. And in that moment, he knew this wasn't just about a wrong number anymore. Their lives had already crossed lines that could not be uncrossed. Who is monitoring us? Why are we being monitored? He thought within himself. War is coming.